Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Erica Heald, and welcome to Content Chat. Each week here on LinkedIn, we are live streaming conversations about all of the things that matter to content marketers, and featuring some of my favorite people who I've learned a ton from over the years in conversation with me. If you're watching us live right now on LinkedIn, say hello and ask us questions as we go along. And everyone else, if you're watching this in the replay, you can leave us comments and we'll get back to you on those too. So without further ado, today we are talking about a topic that I think most of us are experienced with in some way or another, which is how, when you love content marketing, but you just are not feeling it, how do you get your content marketing mojo back? And so I have my friend and content marketer extraordinaire, Carmen Hill, with me today. Carmen, please say hello and take a minute to introduce yourself.
Yes, hello. I'm excited to be here with my friend Erica, and I am an independent content strategist and writer. My consultancy is called Chill Content for reasons that I was blessed to get without any effort on my own part. But in any case, I'm excited to be here. This topic is, I think, so close to home for so many of us right now. And I know Eric and I have talked about it. And so we're looping you in.
Well, I'm so glad that you are here today to talk with me about this, because this is a conversation that we started, some time ago with our friend Pamela Muldoon, who's an agent of chaos with us. And, we actually even pitched this as a content marketing world workshop, and we didn't get it this year, but this is a sneak preview of what part of that workshop with the three of us would have been like. Because let's face it, at some point in our careers, maybe even right now for some of us, you have those moments where you just are thinking, maybe I should go work as a barista, or perhaps I could get a job in a bookstore or a record store. You start having these feelings because you just can't anymore. You can't, let's say, for example, you just can't write another piece of content for X for somebody who wants to be cool on the internet. You just can't do it. And you're like, is this really how I'm putting my years of experience to work? That's just, an example. Carmen, do you have some examples of those moments when folks just, they have signs that they're just not feeling it anymore?
Yeah, well, I can speak for myself, and by anecdotal evidence from colleagues and friends. I think the root cause of a lot of this is that we're high achievers and we have a vision of what our work can be. And if you're in circumstances for whatever reason where you're not able to actually deliver to that full potential, it's frustrating. And you think, oh, well, if I just do this one more thing, then, I will be able to do work and feel like I'm living up to my full potential. And when that is not possible for whatever reason, whether it's because of the organization and maybe changes that are happening, or it's because of global things, like whether it's a pandemic or some sort of economic upheaval where you may not even have a job that you can try and do your best at. I mean, those things that are externally driven that affect us in such personal ways, I think that's where it feels like, you're beating your head against a wall. It doesn't matter how hard you beat your head. It's not going to actually make you feel better. And so I think that's where a lot of us, particularly these last several years have felt it and felt like there was a sense of joy maybe that we wanted to feel in our work again, or just in general. And I think that when that's missing for too long, it just beats you down.
My friend Tatiana Beal had introduced me about a decade ago to the concept of the idea of the Sunday scaries. And that's one of those things, like when you on Sunday nights or maybe even Sunday afternoons, you start getting that pit in your stomach about something you have to work on the next day, or about going in to that environment where people don't maybe respect what you do or understand what you do. and having to fight that uphill battle. You start to feel sick to your stomach, or maybe you're even getting a mild migraine. Oh, maybe you won't be able to go to work the next day because you're actually just having that anxiety. I mean, I think that's one of the kind of symptoms that starts to tell you, hey, maybe you're about to experience burnout.
Yeah, there's this concept in psychology, which I, first of all, caveat, do not profess to have any expertise in this area, but there's this concept called learned helplessness. And when you are continually impacted by negative stimuli, and whatever you do doesn't change it, where you don't have the control to make it go away, it starts to make you feel helpless. And so when you feel like that, like you don't have control over the situation, you kind of stop trying. It's like, even if you could do something and maybe work a little harder at it, it's like, well, why bother? And that's really, I think, for creative people in particular, really, a high risk zone to find yourself in, because that's what we've got, is that creative spark, that energy. And if that is depleted, we can't do good work. And it's kind of a self-perpetuating cycle in that case. So I think it's important to find a way to break out of it and to replenish that energy, so that you can come back to work and have that sense of excitement and anticipation instead of dread and anxiety, like Sunday scaries or Monday scaries or Tuesday scaries or whatever.
And sometimes it's the environment that's the problem too, because sometimes you come in and the role looks amazing on paper, promises are made in interviews, and then you walk in and you start the job and it's so not what you thought you were signing up for. I know I've certainly had that happen, where I was hired to build a team, and instead I came in on my first day for the job, and wow, all of a sudden there were two people hired to work for me that I had never met before, and I didn't get to hire my team. And these people suspiciously didn't have job descriptions. And I'm like,
Oh,
oh my God, did they hire two of the other people who had applied for my job to report into me? And then they're not telling me? True story. Those are the kinds of
yikes.
things that you're like, whoa, you can't fix that kind of an environment. So, I mean, I think that's the other way that you can lose your mojo, is when things just change rapidly and you don't have that control, and things are not going in the direction you want, and you don't have the ability to course correct. Then you also can start feeling like you're not good at your job. You're not good at what you do anymore, because the rules have all changed.
Yeah, and I think too, once you're in those positions, sometimes if you've put a lot of work into something, let's just say it's a content strategy or marketing strategy, something where you've done, like a lot of work, you've talked to a lot of stakeholders, you've done the work to lay the foundation for a initiative, big project, or what have you. And then when something changes, whether it's whatever it is, whether it's personnel change or the budget gets pulled or doesn't get granted in the first place. And so then you have all of this work and it's like off the table. And it's incredibly, I guess, like disheartening, to say the
Yeah.
least. But sometimes there's not even necessarily a reason. It just gets, maybe set aside, ignored. You put all the work into that strategy, and then you just kind of end up, whether through habit or whatever that might be, whatever those external factors are, you do what you've always done.
And I have
And sometimes maybe it's like, maybe you kind of, lose the organizational courage to do something different or new.
100%. And for those of you who are saying, "Oh, I think I don't have any issues in this area. I'm totally not burnt out in any way, shape, or form." We call that denial, and we'd like to encourage you to take the burnout quiz that our friend Maureen Jan published a few years back, because you're probably a little bit crispier than you're thinking that you are. And the first step, well, as with many other things, is acknowledging that you're having that burnout, letting yourself have, admitting to yourself that you're not in that spot where you're jazzed and you're so psyched to be doing it. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're not still an amazing marketer. Sometimes you just need to hit the reset button.
take that pause to refresh. I'm saying this as I just came off 2 weeks of vacation where had a different kind of exhaustion, which was, spending 24/7 with children under the age of 6 who were delightfully exhausting. but yeah, it feels like even just a couple of weeks vacation, even if you don't change fundamentally the situation you're in, just taking a break from it. And this does feel like a little bit of, speak from a place of privilege that I can take 2 weeks and not spend it working on a side project, because to make ends meet at this particular moment. But just that pause, just the change of scenery, and not, taking a little bit of break from the beating your head against the wall. Your head starts to feel better after a couple of weeks. So yeah, I think that it's a good place, at least for me, to be having the conversation, because I can actually feel the difference that can make just in attitude.
Totally. I think the first time that I really had to take a break was in 2003. I had been at Charles Schwab for 3 years. So I started, right after all the Y2K stuff became a big meh, whatever. But I started there as the dot-com bust started to happen all around us. I had one colleague who had invested in Webvan, and he actually had paper stock certificates, and he wallpapered one wall in his office with those stock certificates after they became insolvent, just as kind of a reminder about investing and how so much of the dot-com stuff could evaporate so quickly. But by 2003, I had been through 4 rounds of layoffs. I had in those 3 years 7 different bosses, ranging from a director to an EVP. So I reported into the business, I reported into marketing, I reported all over the place. I did some of the best work of my career, but I was exhausted because the amount of change to have to get to know 7 different bosses, to just have to figure out, okay, now who's in charge of doing what and what's going on. I literally I just gave myself a sabbatical, which felt really scary. But it also felt necessary because I just didn't see how on earth I could continue in that kind of an environment. Even though my business partners loved the work I did, I just needed to step back and remind myself why it is that I do this kind of work. I needed to remind myself that I was a great writer, that I loved doing those kinds of projects, and just really, hit that reset button, because the job had become just, whew, it was like 5 jobs crammed into one job,
Well, and sometimes, when those, circumstances that change. In fact, I was just remembering this morning, our friends Jenny Magic and Melissa Brucker have a book that's called Change Fatigue. And I flipped it open to the preface, which is actually titled Everyone is Exhausted. So that was apt. So it's a good one to pick back up and remember maybe some constructive tips. But similar to that experience that you were just describing, and sometimes you end up in a situation where you're not a good fit. I've been in that situation where, and in that situation, it's that your best work may not be enough. And that also is exhausting and frustrating and scary, because then you really do feel like you've lost your mojo. And, or if you're laid off because you feel like, gosh, I did my best, I was doing good work, or I thought I was doing good work. And even if it's not something because that has to do with the quality of your work or your performance, it feels like it is. And so after situations like that, I think there's no way to escape feeling that kind of deflation and like you've lost something, or you're not as good as you thought you were, or whatever. But that also makes the moment where you regain that mojo even sweeter. I've had that happen a couple of times. I remember very distinctly after a layoff situation, and I was able to pick up a new project, and it was the first time kind of to have that new project kind of anticipation and excitement. And it was very creative, and I hadn't been doing a lot of, really creative things for a while, just because of the nature of the role and the organization I was in. And it was so fun to like be doing the work, and I literally said, I've got my mojo back. And it was exhilarating. And I think, finding, obviously you don't want to put yourself in a position of like being laid off or, having a bad fit in order to have that, the dramatic kind of shift. But if you can, put that into your, somehow make that part of your creative process or your work without having, the negative thing to instigate it. That's what I'm looking for now, is to find some ways to build that into my normal routines. And I think it's easy for us to slip away from those things that we prioritize, whether it's exercise or taking care of ourselves in whatever way. It's really easy to say, oh, I'm not going to do yoga today because I've got this meeting. I really need to go to this meeting because there's 7 people scheduled, or whatever it is. It's can be hard to prioritize our own, what we need to be creative and to deliver our best. But yeah, that's what I'm aspiring to do, starting today. Yoga today.
Well, I think for me, at least, the way that I was able to prioritize things like, self-care and wellness, especially when I've had really intense jobs, is by putting money and my calendar to work. So when I knew that I was working, a lot in a high stress situation, I got a membership with Burke Williams, which was like a local spa. And I made an appointment, a recurring appointment each month to get a massage, because I spent all of my time on calls at my desk like this at the computer, getting all bunched up. They used to always be like, so could you relax your shoulders? And I'd be like, what do you mean? That's the level of needing a massage every month I was at. But literally, I wouldn't do it because you get so busy and your calendar gets away from you. But I had to go and pay in advance for those massages by setting it up as a subscription. And I put it on my calendar as a recurring meeting that was just blocked. That is what I had to do, like, to make sure that I actually did that.
100%. I would be curious. I don't know. I can't see the chat if there's other ideas or questions that people might. I know we've got a close-knit community here, and I would love to hear from some other people,
like
if they have.
Amy and Ann, let us know some of your ideas for ways to prioritize those things that we know that we should be doing that help us keep in balance. I'm gonna note something that I always do that I was reminded of, because this weekend I was reading Ann Handley's latest edition of her newsletter, and she was talking about some of those ways that marketers, writer people, can slow down and really be analog, be in the moment, etc. And one of the things she mentioned is something I literally do every single day, and that is I take my dogs for walks. I take them separately because they have different walks that they want to take, because one's an English bulldog and one's a French bulldog. They do not like the same things. All right. One likes dogs and babies. The other one likes adult humans. So taking them on the same walk is not a good thing. But that's 35 to 40 minutes every morning where I do not have my earbuds in. I am not talking on the phone to people. I am not scrolling through social media. I am walking around and saying hello to the neighborhood dogs and cats. I am looking at what the dogs are sniffing. I am in that moment and letting my mind wander. And just like having that as the way that I intentionally start every single day. In a way, it's akin to doing a meditation or something else like that, where you just open yourself up to those creative ideas. You don't have any preset, thing that you are trying to like work through. You're just going. And for me, that was something that really has helped me stay kind of grounded and being able to be creative even when I have a really busy schedule.
Yeah, 100%. It's actually scientifically proven that your brain is working in those moments when aren't focusing it with intention on a particular problem. It's kind of like sleeping on it, actually really does work.
Totally. And we got some feedback from Amy about boundaries, being aware of your
Yes.
personal and professional boundaries. And you know what? That is so true, and it's timely because I have 3 huge projects right now, and I got asked if I could get something done over the holiday weekend, and I said nope.
It's hard to
And
do.
yeah, it's hard to
It's
do.
hard to do.
But if you say sure, then guess what? You're going to be, expected every time to say yes and sure, or you're going to be asked all the time. So, having those boundaries is so important because when you don't have them, that's also how you're going to start feeling really put out or stressed because you need to have some of that time to yourself where you do things that recharge you and rejuvenate you. Another thing I do every single week is I volunteer at the local SPCA. I do both, work one-on-one with the animals, and I train other volunteers for working with small animals. And again, I put that in my calendar. It's an immovable object in my calendar. So, that's, part of the having the boundaries is making it real. If you manage everything by having it in your calendar, you got to do that. If you manage everything by having it on your to-do list, same thing. You have to have those things that can help you recharge in order to make the most of those efforts. I think another thing that can happen is when you have a gap, you can get so focused on finding your next client or finding your next job that you don't take the time. Like you feel guilty about doing any of those things that recharge you. You feel like you should be putting all of your energy into finding the next thing. And I think that's also putting too much pressure on yourself.
Yeah, that's really hard because I think it's that sense of, approaching something from a sense of abundance versus scarcity. And it's really easy to, when you are in a sense having an authentic sense of abundance, it's really easy to talk about. But when you're having an authentic, reality of scarcity, it's it's almost, I mean, I have never been able to find a way to actually, take that time. It's really hard to um, to do anything but, like you say, look for that next client or job. And especially right now, I think we all know, well, I mean, everyone has been touched in some way, whether you're yourself or your friends or your spouse or others in your community. It feels like even if you aren't having that sense of scarcity, that scarcity is like right outside your door.
Yeah.
and and it can make it even harder to do those things we need to do, to both to take care of ourselves but also to do good work. I think you have to, if you're worried and panicked, you're not able to do your best work. And especially if you feel like there's any sense of risk in maybe pushing the boundaries on something creatively, or asking to try something that might be a little bit outside of what's been done before. And those are the ways that we can differentiate, with in the environment, the content ecosystem that we're all working in. But that can be really scary, and especially if you don't have that sense of a safety net, either literally or figuratively.
And for me, when I've been in environments where, maybe it was highly regulated, or, the brand police were really all over everything you did, where there was just, more constraints and less creativity, I've always tried to find something I can do in my own time, in order to still be creative and to tap into that. I always joke that I've never just had a full-time job. I've always had a full-time job plus something else that I was doing on the side. It's like I've never just had one blog. I've always had a couple of them going, because you just never, you never know what it is that you're going to want to create or work through in order to fulfill some of those other things. So I think that's kind of another really important point, is don't wait for someone else to allow you to do that creative work, or wait for permission. Find a way that you can learn those things that you're interested in, or that you can put those talents that you're not using in your job right now to work. Even in a really big company that has a lot of rules, you can find ways in order to comply with their regulations and still do creative projects. When I was at Charles Schwab, I actually wrote for Flavor Pill, which was this fun multi-city email newsletter that was about cool stuff happening in, like, my edition was San Francisco, because that's where I lived. And so I would be able to write about all sorts of fun, film, music, and food related events happening. And I'd even get to go to those events and cover them. And that was something that I was able to do by, notifying my manager and writing, that this does not conflict with my ability to do my job and all that kind of stuff, signing it. You just had to say, hey, I'm going to do this thing. And you could. They just wanted you to disclose what it was, and that you were not using your job as your way to do this other thing. And since, finance has absolutely nothing to do with having a good time in the city, or at least back then it did not.
Full stop.
It was easy for them to say yes. And, luckily at that time, I had a boss who understood that by giving me a creative outlet, that was going to be a positive thing, that it was going to help me bring some of that creativity and those different experiences into the work I was doing every day.
Yeah, and volunteer things like you mentioned, whether it's petting puppies or actually, contributing the same sort of skills that you have in your professional life to another organization. I used to do volunteer marketing for theater companies here in Portland, and that's a whole nother community, which is theater marketers, because there's lots of creativity, but often budget is not commensurate with what you would like to be able to do there.
And that's another good point, is like, budget is always an issue, right? So you have to sometimes get creative and look into your organization and find out, are there hidden pockets of budget that you could actually tap into? And I'm going to give you a crazy example. I have so many of them from Schwab just because I was there for 10 years. So non-consecutive, it was a boomerang situation. But as a result, I have all these interesting, examples, because this was how I was able to stay there for 10 years, is that my job was different all the time. And I'd find these little ways to recharge. So I had one boss during that first crazy 3-year tenure who actually had taken improv classes and gotten them reimbursed by the company, because the improv helped her with, having presentations to the C-suite. And with that in mind, knowing that she had just done that, I said, well, I want to take a class that's, visual creativity, in order to help stimulate the parts of my brain that I'm not using in this job. So I took a printmaking class, so where you actually do silkscreen and screen printing. So I took that for a semester, and it was so lovely. I would go, directly from work to my silk screening class once a week. And again, it was just doing something completely different with my hands in a complete, visual creative environment, that it really did help me come back into work with that enthusiasm and having that slightly different perspective, because it wasn't just that I was doing a thing. It was that I was doing that thing surrounded by a bunch of other people who were putting their creative energies to work. And so just putting myself into a very different situation, because I would never consider myself to be somebody who makes visual art. That for me was just really inspiring and helped kind of unlock some of that stuff, and made me go into work every day with like new enthusiasm, even though what I was doing at work had absolutely nothing to do with those artistic endeavors.
Yeah, I think you would probably agree with this as well. That's what I do with gardening and just going out and something you have control over. Well,
Yes.
I have to qualify that with, you don't have control over the weather, you don't have control over the dogs that may come by and, pee on your favorite shrub, but at least you do have some measure of control over, what you can do to create beauty in the world, or grow your own food, or whatever your particular passion may be. But yeah, that's one of those things where you can actually see the fruits of your efforts, and feel that satisfaction regardless of what anyone else is doing.
And I mean, as marketers, so much of the work we do has a really long time frame, just from, planning through to execution. And then you don't even have, if you're in B2B marketing, it might be another, year to 18 months before you actually see the return on investment from the work that you did. So you could be talking about spending 3 or 4 years of time before actually feeling like this big
Yeah.
project you did paid
Yeah.
off.
Assuming that it gets to live that long.
Or that you get to stay in the role. Because I think, we've also seen over the past 18 months, I mean, I've had multiple clients be let go, but not just them, their entire marketing team let go, which is, astonishing, to think how these companies are going to try to go to market with only sales and PR without marketing. I guess they think AI is just going to do everyone's jobs, which is hilarious. But everyone thinks they're a marketer, so I guess that's how those kinds of decisions get
Yeah.
made.
The consequences of something like that are felt further down. It's like the lagging indicator, if I'm using
Mm-hmm.
that term correctly. But you don't feel the impact maybe right away, because a lot of, to your point, things that you've put in motion 18 months ago are coming into fruition now. But if the work's not happening, or if it's being, even if someone can pick up the same things, you're spreading your team thinner and thinner, and like a peanut butter sandwich, it just gets thinner and thinner to the point that it's really not very effective or satisfying.
Well, I think we also, when we are in some of these roles, when you're in house, or when you're running your own business, it's important to make sure that your team knows that it's important for them to take that time to recharge, that you want them to do things like read a book or listen to a podcast, et cetera, that you don't want them just to be heads down on their work 24/7. I actually would use um, my annual professional development planning sessions with my direct reports to kind of bring that home, because I wanted to make sure that people were always continuously learning and growing, and not just like, oh, because I wanted to get more ROI out of their work. It's because I wanted them to be happy in their jobs. I wanted them to
Yeah.
actually come to work and love doing marketing. Because to
Yeah,
me, it
and
would be a nightmare not to,
if you can set something up that's even, like the agency I worked with for years and years, our creative team had a standing meeting that was called Creative Think Tank every Friday. Maybe somebody would be leading the session, and sometimes it was just like a therapy session. But sometimes you would have somebody who would go and like do some research, and do that professional development, but also come back and share it with the rest of the team, which is, a great way to, not only re-energize yourself, but also, the rest of your team. But sometimes maybe it would be, Erica comes back and shares what she's learning in printmaking. So sometimes we had a passionate home brewer on our team, and he came and talked about the process of making beer. Or but even simple things, those things don't cost a lot. It costs an hour of time, and I think that we've all been in hours with those team members sitting there that were not, had not as much ROI as having your whole team come away with a little bit more creative spark and joy for their
totally.
work.
And for the most part, I'm a fan of remote work. But like, I do go into a co-working space every so often, more frequently if my partner is home on an extended break, because I need to have that focus. But what's the one thing that I do actually miss about being in a workplace is I somehow always would find other foodies who would want to do like a lunch club. So, gosh, I think it's like maybe three or four places that I've worked. We actually have had a lunch club where once a month, um, one person was in charge of bringing the lunch. Actually, it's more than four places. This is so funny. And I've never really thought about it until we had this conversation right now, Carmen. But it's because of what you mentioned about that, taking that hour with the team to have somebody who's passionate about something. So we would once a month, somebody would be bringing the food. And like now in retrospect, you'd think, well, what a nightmare, Erica. You have all these food allergies. And I'm like, I know. But I actually had a client who would do this, and the folks who would organize it, they actually loved it because it made it to them, it was like a fun challenge. And plus, I participated because we all brought stuff. But it was just, it was neat because everyone would talk about what it is that they brought and why, or we would have a theme, and just you'd learn so much about the people that you worked with based upon the stories they told you about what it was that they brought and why. And I have to say, though, I think one of the most popular things I ever brought is what I called white trash dip, which was Newton sour cream, 16-ounce container opened, and you pour in a package of Lipton onion soup mix. So I would never do that now because I do not eat onions to this at that kind of a level. And then you stir it, and then you eat it with Ruffles. Now, I have baked so many delicious things over many years, but I have to tell you that specific recipe has made me more friends, including internationally, because I made that the year that I went to the UK for Christmas. That was my contribution to Christmas dinner because I brought some of the packages with me, and I made that, and everyone was raving about it. It's so hilarious.
That's
But for
funny.
me, that was the fancy dip my mom would make when I was a kid growing up.
Yeah,
That was a
yeah.
big
Had
deal. It was
had
a
had
special occasion.
some version of that for my birthday party in fourth or fifth grade too. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, we did a similar thing. We our creative team also we did food cart reviews. Portland's known for its food carts, and we would go to a different food cart every Friday, and then we would do a review. Everybody would bring back to, the big conference room, and then we would rate whatever we had ordered and then write it up as a blog post. It was hashtag Food Cart Friday. But that was fun too.
I love that. That is so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because these things, they can help on a personal level, but they also build the teams and they help build a really positive, collaborative workplace culture. So it's funny that these things that are good for the individuals and for keeping their mojo going can also help everybody. So it's not just a selfish thing.
Yeah. And then, I think that the environment you're in and the people that you're working with is such a, an important part of kind of your own, work practice. But sometimes you don't actually have control. That's another example of where you may have be able to influence that sort of thing, but maybe you're not. Maybe you're not in a situation where you can do that, and that's where you also have to make space for yourself. And whether that's like, I know periodically, and I haven't quite gotten through the whole course, but Headspace, which is a meditation app, has a creativity course. And I've done the first 10 several times. And then when you get to the second part, that's when you're supposed to have like a notepad handy and I couldn't describe it to you in detail because I've never gotten through that second part of the course. But, something like that you can do, on your own. I mean, something that's more concrete, maybe. I mean, yes, take a walk, go with the dogs for a walk, get out in the garden, do something that you love to reset. But if you're looking for ways to actively kind of practice creativity, you mentioned Ann Hanley had some great tips. Maybe it's drawing your notes, doodling your notes instead of writing in words. But yeah,
We're writing every morning, first thing when you get up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm really good about doing that for other people. You know, it's like, oh, I've got an assignment to finish. I'll do that at 5 o'clock this morning because
Yeah.
I mean, that is when I'm feeling creative. But I think if you can kind of reserve some of that creativity and, you know, set aside that time for yourself to cultivate it, because it does get depleted. And if you can, you know, make that investment in yourself, you know, do as I say, not as I do. But I'm again, reset, do better.
And, you know, and sometimes you can do all of these things and you can be doing everything you can in order to get your mojo back. But, you know, going back to your earlier point, sometimes maybe a place that used to be a good fit for you, maybe you've outgrown your job, or maybe the company starts to go in a new direction and it's just it conflicts with your values. So then sometimes you get in the situation where you may need to scale back your role. Or, you know, I've been in this situation and I've handled it a few different ways. You know, I've done this is really not healthy for me, and just, you know, walked away from the role, given my notice, and, you know, backfilled with creative work until finding a new role that was a better fit. But I've also, you know, at my my longest term job, when it became clear that just the role was going to be focusing more on the stuff that I was really good at and didn't love doing, versus having all of these kinds of projects and things where I was learning and growing and really, you know, flexing my skills. I had a really tough conversation. I met with our head of marketing and my, you know, my mentor, a former manager, and I just let them know that as much as I loved working with them, that, you know, in order to do what I needed to do to continue to grow and to be marketable as a marketer, that I was going to need to find another job. And that frankly, I didn't want to be sneaking around. And so I was just letting them know that I would, you know, schedule things in a way that they didn't conflict with work. I would take time off when I needed to, and schedule around it. And, you know, that was a scary thing to do. I recognize that not everybody feels like they have the psychological safety at work that they can have an honest conversation like that. But if you can, it can be really powerful. You can have situations where then maybe your schedule gets changed in order to help you pursue either, you know, taking another job or taking on a part-time role or something else. So that way you can keep that job and feel better about what you're doing. You know, or you can even end up in a situation where they say, hey, well, we were going to reorg anyway. And, you know, what would your ideal job look like? Or, hey, we were going to reorg anyway. Do you want to raise your hand and be laid off with, you know, a big severance package? Because I've had friends who have done that too. By having those, you know, frank conversations where they admit to themselves that they just aren't feeling it anymore and have that conversation with their trusted manager, then they actually get that lifeline from their employer that allows them to do something life-changing. One marketer that I know who did that took her package and went and bought, I kid you not, a seaside shop that sells ocean glass. You know, the glass. Yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, you're
Yeah.
like, what a completely different thing to do. But of course, she has to market the business, but she's just so much happier because she
Yeah.
went and she, you know, took that payout and put it to work doing something creative that filled her with joy. And I still think about that and I'm like, whoa.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, sometimes, yeah, it's a remarkable, I think, I don't know very many people who have had that opportunity, but yeah, boy, if you if you can get it, that's pretty sweet.
And I think with a lot of this stuff, a lot of it comes back to kind of not defining yourself by your job. It's funny because, you know, when I look at people's LinkedIn profiles, or when I do coaching for folks on, you know, how to frame themselves. I mean, if you're a CEO of a large company, sure, your headline should be CEO at whatever your company's name is. But for the rest of us, your LinkedIn headline needs to be about you as a person and what you value. what kind of work that you do or what you bring to the table. It should never be director marketing at company name, because do you want to have your entire identity wrapped up in this job when you're not the one who controls your being in that job? For me, I think that's a big nope.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and even, sometimes it's taking a break from, I mean, I think there's a lot of pressure to have the perfect LinkedIn profile, to post, at least once a day or 3 times a week or whatever it is. To, sometimes you just need to take a break from that too. I can say I've
Yep.
kind of done that, of just being more of a passive consumer and not feeling so much pressure, to, you know, always be on, always be present, and every, all of these channels. And sometimes in order to kind of regenerate your own creativity or productivity, you have to take a break from those things as well, not just your jobby job.
100%. And I got to do that this year, um, because I found myself in a situation where I had just sunsetted a big client, and I could either spend my time hustling to find the next big thing, or I recognized I was really burnt out from the work that I'd been doing. And so, first, my big goal was to make a big dent in writing my book. And I mean, I made a small dent. I did a lot of great interviews with people that I'll be able to use for the book. I have a fantastic outline. And in my head, I'm writing the book. But on paper, I did not make nearly as much progress as I thought I was going to, because I really did need that just time. I needed to have time to exhale and to just, figure out who did I want to be working with? What was the work that I would be most excited about doing this coming year? And, Carmen and I, we have a shared interest in doing things like, that support our communities. So we have an iron still in the fire about a potential project to work on together. That would be a pro bono consulting project where we would be working with an animal organization. So, that was something that we concocted when I was in the midst of this, feeling like I needed to reset and refocus what I was working on. And the best part about, the introductory session we had with these folks and the little bit of work we did for them, first of all, we did something that we considered to be tiny amount of work, just a little bit of research and putting together a deck and having a conversation. That, what to us was just a small thing, we got the feedback from them that they literally took our recommendations and really heard what we said. They made significant change.
Yeah,
It like helped them
immediately.
immediately. I
Yeah,
don't
it
know.
was so fun. That was no, I came out of that meeting feeling like I've got my mojo back.
That's right. Exactly. And what was so great for me is by us doing that, it helped me realize, okay, I don't want to work for, very specific kinds of clients. And so I have to put out there into the universe and into what I'm publishing the fact that, hey, I like to work with nonprofits. I've actually worked in a 501c3 membership association. I love working with membership associations. I've worked with the Sierra Club. I've done all these things. So by putting that out there, like now I have 2 association clients and 1 fintech client, and I'm doing huge website projects for all 3 of them. They could not be more different companies or projects. But for me, it really works because then I'll have the interplay of all these different kinds of cross pollination. Because that's one of the other things for me is I can't focus too deeply on just one thing. That is how I get burnt out. I have to have the cross pollination of different people, different industries, and different kinds of work in order to really get the best work out of me. I got to have that deadline pressure, and I have to have the variety.
Yeah, and sometimes that cross-pollination too, just in, a creative project, uh, bringing something in that's totally different often is a way to differentiate literally, the work that you're doing, in one sphere. And so, you could be doing fintech and bring, I mean, maybe not, literally bringing your food passion into fintech. That may be a stretch, but just for sake of example.
Well, if they were here locally, I would be bringing my love for food into their office because I'd be bringing them baked goods. Instead, I bring those baked treats to co-working, which
Yeah.
is
Well,
also
they're the lucky ones.
they're the lucky recipients of that.
Yeah.
But I think it can be hard to, get back into the groove. And, for me, again, it all just comes back down to scheduling things. You got to keep stuff in your calendar. And like, if you are taking a break, I think it can be freeing to have a little bit of time where you have that unstructured time. But I think, if you are knowing that you're going to want to get back into having a regular schedule, you do need to have a regular schedule and start holding yourself accountable by having things on the calendar that you want to actually get done. Because if not, it is going to be really hard to get back into the groove of having a client or going back to a full-time job. I mean, honestly, can you imagine going back into a full-time job where you worked 8 to 6 for somebody else in an office? Because I think I've been doing this consulting for too long now, because it's been almost 10 years.
Yeah, the fluorescent lights alone would kill me. Yeah. But yeah, this is my first day back at my desk. It's gonna be my first day back at the mat, as they say. And yeah, it's good. It's good to get back to that and not stay away too long.
Well, we only have a little bit of time left. So I think maybe the other big thing we can talk about is, you and I kind of do the same thing when it comes to networking, which is we get on an airplane and we go far away from our homes in order to connect with completely different people. And so this sometimes is us speaking at events on content marketing. But we also, I think we're both going again this year to CEX, the Creator Economy Expo, and
Content Entrepreneur Expo.
Content Entrepreneur Expo. That's right. It rebranded in Cleveland, which is a place that we started to know and love because of the decade plus of content marketing world being held there. So why don't you share just like why you like going to conferences as a way to really like to network and keep your mojo going?
Well, for one thing, I love learning, and I love hearing the sessions and the keynotes, but I also just love the community. And not all events have that. We have been blessed. The whole reason I even know you and Amy and Ann and all of our good friends from content marketing world are from going, and that's where I've met most, if not many, also Twitter, but sometimes those worlds interconnect. So part of it is just, I'm a social butterfly and I like the people and it's fun to get together, but also I always come away energized with new ideas. And it's like, even if I'm not burned out in a job or on a particular project, just injecting that, that energy and the different ways of approaching things and new skills and new information, and is just, it definitely, I don't know quite how to describe it other than it re-energizes. And so I do prioritize that. And I, chose to take a break from speaking this year, because as much as I love doing that, it also would mean that I would be working on a presentation every weekend this summer. And for once I was like, I think I need a break from that part, but I definitely am not taking a break from the people and the community and even the Content Entrepreneur Expo. I don't consider myself exactly a content entrepreneur in the sense that many of the people there might be, but in a sense, I think all of us, especially if you are independent, even if you're not independent, if you have that entrepreneurial spirit that you bring to your work and to your job, I think we can all learn from others and take away those great ideas to put to work in our own jobs and practices.
It is fun too because I have kind of, I have a system for when I take notes at events, and people always kind of look at me kind of funny because I always have like
It's
two.
called envy. They're looking at you with envy, Erica.
So I'll always have at least two pens, if not three, of different colors because I'm writing my notes and things. And then I will like highlight things by like starring them or, just kind of create a little system. But my favorite part is when I'm in the middle of like taking notes of things I want to remember, but then I get an idea. And so then that's just something inspired by something that the person is saying. So a concrete idea that relates into it. And then I put like a big pink star because I always have a pink pen, a big pink star, and then, put a little square around it so that way I can come back later and remember this great idea that I got. Because I think that is so valuable, right? And to look back after an event at your notebook and just see all of those, like, be like, oh, look at all those great ideas I had. Like, that makes it all worth it.
Mine look like this. They're a big mess. But I do put it into, it used to be Evernote. I would come back and I had like whole folders of things from events. I've got hashtag CM World 2013 and, all of the things from that. But it is fun to go back and look at how far the industry has come, how far our profession has come since, I think the first year I went to South by Southwest was like 2010. So I've got 5 years of South by notes and then, 13 years of Content Marketing World notes and Marketing Profs B2B forum notes. And it is great. My notes are not as beautiful as yours though.
So. My digital notes are not beautiful because they're all in, Evernote or Notion. But what I did love about Evernote is a couple of years that I went, my friend Yuriv Ravinovich also went, and he and I would actually share a notebook about the event. And so in real time, even if we were in the same session, so if we were having we could have a side conversation when we're taking our notes without being disruptive. And so if you're one of those people who's a fast writer and, Twitter chats make you be a fast writer if you weren't one already anyway. But it was just fun to have those places where I could collaborate and ideas share in real time with another human being. It was amazing. So anyway,
that's kind of what Twitter was too. And there was an app for a while that I absolutely loved. Like you could use it on your iPad, and I can't think of the name of it right now. Apologies to the creators of that app. But you could actually pull tweets over into your notes, and so you could just like grab the whole tweet, and which was awesome. And then you could storify it. Was that what that was called?
Yes. Oh my goodness.
There were so many great tools where you could really capture all of that a lot better than you could on my notes that are now like kind of like at the back of my notebook, which I, have great intentions to rewrite somewhere.
Well, to wrap up, I have to share this comment we just got from our friend Molly St. Louis, thanking us for addressing the mental health side of marketing. Burnout is real. It really is. And you've got to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and prioritizing yourself and setting those boundaries, doing those things that will help you stay healthy and happy, because if not, you can't do good work.
Yeah.
So
and work with people you like if you can. It makes such a difference. I know I love working with you, Eric. I love working with you too, Molly. It does make a big difference because it feeds you instead of sucks your soul away.
Exactly. And Molly, we have got to figure out a project for 3 of us to do together because hello, 100%. It would be so awesome. All right. So Carmen, if people want to hear more from you, including, more ideas about what you're doing in content marketing, where can they find you? How should they connect?
Well, in spite of what I may have said earlier, I am here on LinkedIn and I do pay attention, and I do hope to contribute more actively now that I've had this reset. Also, my website, where I also always have very good intentions of publishing, and maybe I will do better at that as well. It's chillcontent.com. And yeah, so those are two places. And then yeah, come to Content Entrepreneur Expo. I would love seeing you there, or Content Marketing World, and hang out with Erica on Mondays on Content Chat. This is fun.
Thank you so much, Carmen, for being our guest. And everyone, we'll catch you again next week. Bye, guys.
Thanks.